Welcome to Friday 15 with Master B2B. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoare, February 2025. Excited to be here with you, Andy, and with our community of B2B e-commerce professionals. Andy is my co-founder in this series. Welcome, Andy, to another Friday 15 session.
Yeah, I like this music better. I feel like it's a little more upbeat, a little more energetic, and I think that's good in the new year. So good choice on the music.
Thanks, man. It's like a dose of super strong espresso. I love it. And good stuff. So we got a cool session today, but before we get into our actual topic today, we first need to go to our breaking news. Andy, what's happening? Honeywell splitting into 3 companies. What the heck's going on here? Another breakup. What's going on?
Yeah, it just feels like we're seeing more of this. It's the PE or private equityization, in my opinion, of corporate America and conglomerates. It's turned out there's a lot of enterprise value that's locked up in these companies, and they just, especially in B2B, they'll acquire because it's adjacent, and they wake up one morning and go, what business are we in? We've got 27 different companies, and we thought they were all tied together, but when we started 25 years ago, it made sense, and now we've ended up with a monstrosity or a Frankenstein version. So the activist investors come along, they put pressure on them, and they do models and say, look, if these were 3 different companies, they'd be worth more than the whole. Right. The sum would be worth more than the parts. So GE did this in 2021, and GE Aerospace, I think, it was gone up like 4x. And so it really worked for them. But Alcoa did this in 2016, and it's pretty much gone sideways. So, hey, jury's out on this, but it won't stop the PE firms and the activist investors from doing more of it. And Honeywell, a big company in B2B, is the latest.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, they say the riches are in niches, right? So I guess maybe this carries over to big companies as well. More focus equals more effectiveness. So interesting to see this, and we'll continue to watch it. So our topic today, this is, Andy, we joke, it's metrics month here on Friday 15. We're talking all about metrics, and we're going to talk today again about metrics because this is a big topic. We got a lot of reactions on LinkedIn when we're talking about how do you measure the effectiveness of digital and e-commerce in B2B. And the question today, Andy, is customer lifetime value, CLV, the single best measure for success for your B2B e-commerce efforts? So, we kind of went down this path starting, 3 weeks ago, right? We asked the question, is digital penetration a good measure of overall, success in digital? And the overall resounding answer was no, it's misleading, right? 58% of our LinkedIn poll said, no way, you shouldn't use penetration of e-commerce as your measure of success. Now, there wasn't a consensus that it's a bad measure. It's just not one that should be used as the principal measure of success, right? So, so again, trying to dig deeper, we said, well, what other KPIs are there? And we talked about this last week, right, Andy? We said, what are the other metrics can be used? And we looked at things like average order value or share of wallet, customer lifetime value was in the conversation, profitability or cost to serve, customer satisfaction, things like NPS, how likely are you, NPS is net promoter score, how likely are you to refer a friend or colleague to this business, which has been in many cases used as a metric, repeat purchase rate, loyalty metrics, things like that, and lots of other things you can look at, conversion rate, et cetera. And we're digging in, trying to figure this out, right? And, what was interesting when we ran our poll last week, we said, hey, what metric best captures? And we gave four ideas. And the one that popped out as the winner was customer lifetime value. Okay, so maybe we're getting some consensus here. It's not percentage of revenue. Maybe it is customer lifetime value. That came in over share of wallet, which is my favorite. Average order value and profitability per order. Those were all in the 11 to 17% range. Customer lifetime value, 56% said, hey, we think that's the best metric. But at the end of the day, we asked the question again, we need to figure out what exactly is this. So Andy, you pulled some data on this and some definitions. What exactly is customer lifetime value?
Well, it was the overwhelming winner because I think in theory it makes a lot of sense in theory. Right. So what we're going to do today is talk about the reality of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of different definitions of it. This isn't even complete. I could give you 15 other versions of this, but it's some version of whatever somebody spends on a yearly basis times the purchase frequency within, or whatever they spend times the purchase frequency. And those two things equal sort of total spend
Right.
times the customer lifetime value. Now, the first one's easy. You know what they're spending. The second one's fairly easy too. You know how often they're buying stuff from you. Where it gets more complicated is around the third one, which is lifetime value. How do you measure that? Are they going to
Well,
be a
this is
customer here for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years,
right,
10 years?
right,
It's
right,
it's sort of a theory, right? And there's another piece here we're going to talk in a moment, which is the profitability of
right,
it,
right,
which is also very difficult to measure because it's highly variable and it depends on the segment as well, right? Because some segments are better, some segments are worse. Some customers are in different segments through the year, and it's very difficult to sort of measure these things. But what we thought we'd do is take a look at, so what are the strengths and weaknesses? So here are what we call the virtues of CLV, and then you can see the profit margin added in. Well, one is that it does consider revenue and time frame. Some of them only consider revenue. I mean, we'll talk to companies and they'll say, "Oh, we just look at their total spend for the year
right,
or for this quarter," and it's like, well, that's a moment in time. Don't you think you should, smooth that out with a time frame? It's a longer term measure because at least you're estimating accurately or inaccurately what a lifetime would be. Because for some customers,
hmm,
especially in the world of Amazon, lifetimes can be pretty short. They're like, this
right,
is great. And then next month, Amazon's great, right? So
right, right,
at least you could throw that in there because you're going to spend money trying to acquire customers, right? The well regarded CAC, customer acquisition costs. And you have to know how much you can spend to acquire somebody because it depends on how long they're going to stick around. And that's the really, really hard one, is how do you measure that, especially in a world where, let's face it, there isn't as much loyalty as there used to be. B2B
right,
companies talk all day long about, oh, they've been a customer of ours for 30 years. I'm like, yeah, but now the son took over. Now he shops and buys on his phone and he doesn't
right,
even know who you are. And he hasn't called your 800 number ever, right? And then the last part here about the virtue is that it should focus on profit, not just revenue. But
right.
this is where you run into some problems. So,
You know,
um,
what's interesting to me about this metric, I actually do really like it because it is, just like I like share of wallet because it is across all different channels. This isn't an isolated metric that says, okay, hey, it's just about digital or e-commerce in a silo or offline. If we're really looking at the holistic way a customer is interacting with your business, that's a good metric, right? I think this has a lot of virtue, but it does also have drawbacks, right? I know that Dan, for example, Dan Stepchute chimed in on this. Andy, Dan is the digital head of digital marketing at Zest Dental. Thank you, Dan, for your comment. He said, if you want the holy grail of metrics, it's CLV. He agrees with us. Cost of customer lifetime value. He said minus cost of goods sold and cost of delivery. And he says compare that apples to apples against orders placed through other sources to measure incremental improvement when orders are placed through the storefront. So if you have a metric of this, you can now look at multi-channel customers. You can say, okay, a customer that uses e-commerce plus my Salesforce or buys through a distributor or whatever, a customer who buys through other channels, they have a higher lifetime value than someone who doesn't, right? And then you can try to move them into say more digital ordering. So there's definitely value, and I think Dan weighed in on this. Any reactions to his comments, Andy?
no, I think he's pointing out almost as well that it's the holy grail minus the cogs and cost of delivery, but there's a lot of difficulty measuring that cost side.
Right.
Because it isn't on a per order basis. Yeah, if you know what the shipping cost is, you can say this is how much this order cost me. But what about if this customer is somebody you're inviting to trade shows? What about this is a customer who you're spending advertising money on? What if the cost of commission for the sales rep who's enabling the purchase? How do you bring all that in there and allocate it to an individual customer? Which is why we thought we'd take a look at the other side of this,
The
which is the
challenge.
challenges. Yep.
Right.
And so, you know, trying to measure an average customer lifetime, good luck. I mean, we just talked about that. How do you know what somebody's future buying habits are going to be and how well you're going to retain them and where you're going to retain them? This is another thing I've seen companies
Right.
struggle with. They assume, and they've bought all these things from me, and they've had a pretty consistent retention rate there. We can presume going forward, extrapolating for that, it's going to be similar. It's like, you can't do that very easily. How do you know what the retention rate is going to be 3 years from now in a dynamically changing marketplace? Very, very hard to do that. But that's not even the most difficult one. The next three in highlight are the ones that really concern me with B2B companies. Can you actually, do you have complete and accurate customer and order data? I mean,
Right.
almost full stop. That you just said it, across multiple touch points, do you even
Right.
have the ability to integrate all that together around a particular customer? I mean, we talk to companies all day long that aren't capable of doing that. So how are you going to measure customer lifetime value if you don't even know what the value is for the customer?
Right. Yep.
You
But
know,
I think
um,
that's also, and also the ability to create cohorts and understand their, their behaviors. So for example, if I'm buying through multiple channels, what channel do they buy in? Right. So are they buying online? They're buying offline. Are you influencing the decision in some way? I mean, those are, looking at that journey, you really need to have good CRM data in order to, tracking data in order to calculate this. And to your first point here, Andy, about how do you know when a customer's done with you? How do you know when they think about that for a minute? When is a customer's lifetime over? What do they buy from you once a year? Does that mean they're still active or not active? There's a lot of questions around that. I mean, you have to set some parameters and some assumptions around it, right? But that's the other challenge too, is how do you know when they start? Well, starting is easy, but how do you know when they finish, right? When's
and
the
is it a
lifetime done?
pause? Yeah,
Right,
I mean, is it a pause or is this a new normal? I mean, you don't know these things, which requires a lot of intel
right,
and a lot of. But the big one that worries me is that not even actually be able to build a 360-degree view of the customer. They might even
right,
know. They maybe know in one channel with a lot of accuracy and historical data, but in another channel they don't really even know, or they can't even estimate. So I guess you might be underestimating certain things and you might be overestimating certain things if you don't have that kind of data. But the reality is, a lot of B2B companies don't have that kind of data. So building a CLV around a customer sounds great. But if you don't have the right kind of data and you don't have the right kind of systems and you're not able to measure value accurately across all touch points, then you're going to run into a lot of problems. And then there's the problem of tying all these investments back, the digital investments back
right,
to
right.
the CLV, right? I mean, how many times have we heard this story? We just built we just replatformed, and we spent $5 million on the software and the services, et cetera. Well, how do you allocate those costs? You
Right.
know, is it a 1 year thing? Is it a 5 year thing? Do certain customers who use it more frequently, do you attribute it to them? Who pays for that, right? And so
Yeah.
there are a lot
Yep.
of questions around how to do the cost side of this.
Yeah, which is, I think that's why the cohort, if you have great data, I mean, I think this is something worth looking at in terms of tracking. If you have good, if you have the ability and you have the data to do it, because you have to create a cohort on activity. You have to say, hey, people that are leveraging these tools we put in place digitally are more valuable to us. They have a higher customer lifetime value. You have to be able to make that connection. If you can't make that connection, don't even try or get the foundations in place, and because you can't use this metric. But that's a key one. So we asked our community, is customer lifetime value the single best measure of success? We put this on LinkedIn, and interestingly, 73% said no. So everyone, last week it was yes, it's the best metric. This week it's no. Look, there's a
We
lot
love
of
it, but it falls short. Yeah, exactly. It's the best
exactly.
metric, but it isn't.
So I think, look, I think as practitioners, and being a practitioner for many years, you struggle with how do you measure this stuff? And I think, the conclusion is kind of twofold for me. And what I've seen success with is you have to use a couple different metrics, but most importantly, you have to kind of go to your boss and ask him what is the thing that they want to see, right? What are the things that, what are the things that he or she thinks are the best ways to measure this stuff, right? What do you think,
Or
Andy?
in your case, your dog, right? I mean, who
Right.
does your dog think?
My dog weighing in over here.
No, it is absolutely true that it's going to depend on, every business is different and every CFO is different. And so you should have a long conversation with the CFO and see what is the metric that you're persuaded by. Some cases that those metrics aren't correct. And over the long term, the CFO is going to be wrong. You're going to
Right.
invest in the wrong metrics framework, and you're going to fall on your face. But more often than not, if you follow what they're interested in, you're going to do okay. But it really depends on what kind of business you're in too. Like if you've got good data, then you can do things like share of wallet, because you might be able to do, the problem I've always had with share of wallet is the denominator. How do you know what everybody else is spending, right?
No.
And customer lifetime value is a great measure if you've got profitability data per customer, right? And you can allocate those costs. So it really depends on your systems, depends on your data, and ultimately, as you pointed out, depends on who's going to be judging this. So really the finance team. And there are people, by the way, who will say none of this stuff matters. And then ultimately, what really does matter are the CSAT scores. In fact, Jordan Jewell made that argument that he's a fan of that. And who's to argue with that? I mean, ultimately, if customers are happy and they're consistently spending money with you, then that first part really matters.
Yeah, that's why one of the reasons I like Net Promoter Score as a measure, right, of customer satisfaction, because if you're good at it and you can create cohorts, you need to look at the buyer's behavior and how they're interacting with you to tie this back to digital tools, right? Because you have to see if they're using the digital tools, and if they are, if some of these metrics are improving, like share of wallet, like NPS, like customer lifetime value, then you're impacting the success of the business. So I think you've got to use multiple metrics, Andy. I've always found, and by the way, folks, it's important to use some of those e-com metrics like conversion rate, like average order value through your e-commerce site, like penetration of total sales. You should measure that stuff because it's still valuable to understand, the overall impact e-commerce has. I think what we've learned through this metrics month is that no single metric is the best metric for success. We have to look at multiples. So anyhow, Andy, we're coming up on Friday 20 here, so we got to get to some announcements. Thank you, folks, for your input on this topic. It's been a really interesting couple of sessions here. So want to remind folks that we have our forum, which is free for practitioners. You can go online to masterb2b.com and sign up or apply to join our forum. It is a private online community, sort of like a LinkedIn, but just for B2B e-commerce professionals. We've got hundreds of people in there, lots of great interaction happening every day. We have roundtables coming up around the country. In fact, just this month, Andy, next week, we're going to be in Atlanta and then Dallas the following week. We'll also be in Cleveland, Denver, Minneapolis, Charlotte, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, New York City, and St. Louis. Let's not forget about St. Louis. Isn't that your hometown, Andy? Is that always close by?
My wife is from St. Louis.
That's right.
It's my honorary hometown.
Your honorary. That's right. That's right. So St. Louis people, we're coming to you. These are 2-hour discussions, late afternoon, followed by cocktails and dinner. Really great gatherings. Encourage you to go to our website, masterb2b.com, look at the events section, and you can sign up there as a practitioner. There's no cost to you. As a sponsor, if you want to join us as a solution provider, we do have some availability, so let us know. We also have our summit coming up, Andy, in 1 month, a little more, 5 weeks. I'm excited about this at the University of Chicago on March 12th. We're holding our 3rd annual Mindshare Summit. There'll be over 100 people there. Practitioners, almost all practitioners. It is available. We still have about 10 seats, I think, open. So if you're a practitioner, sign up now because those are going fast. It's going to be a great event all day, one day at the University of Chicago's Bleacher Center. And I also want to remind folks that we have our Friday 15 sessions, all of them available as a podcast, available on Spotify, Apple, Google, and of course, YouTube and our website. And you can listen at your leisure while you're driving, while you're running around, while you're working out, while you're doing laundry or cooking or whatever you do. So encourage you all to check that out. Andy, any final words on this topic before we wrap up for this week?
Well, nothing on this topic, but we can't ignore that this weekend is Super Bowl weekend. And
yes.
We've got the Chiefs and the Eagles. And who do you think is going to win?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I have no skin in the game on this one, man. I'm a Jersey and LA guy. I mean, I don't, maybe I guess Philly because it's a little closer, right? So or maybe the Eagles, Kansas City's won a bunch of times. What do you think? Who do you got?
It just Patrick Mahomes just seems like if it's ever close, and most Super Bowls are, he wins. I mean, he's won like 18 games of one score or less, and it's like the guy doesn't lose in close games. And so unless it's a blowout, it's going to be a close game. If it's a close game, he just seems to take over the game. And like him or hate him, I don't know how you bet against him if it's
Right.
close, and it probably will be.
Well, we'll see if you're right next week, Andy. We'll make a call. That's your prediction. Folks, thanks for listening in on our Friday 15. Again, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.